Hey guys, Jameson Redding here with another Jackson Kayak quick tip for you. Today I'm talking about my 4 favorite knots. I've got some old fly line here, so it's a little bit easier to see, and a carabiner that will demonstrate the hook. To start with, I use a lot of line-to-line connections. Most of my rods all have braid on them, but I like to have fluorocarbon leader on a lot of that. So the way I connect braid to something like mono or fluorocarbon, being that they're 2 different line sizes and 2 different types of material, the double uni works great for me. So the way that I do that, if you guys can see, I basically overlap the 2 ends of line. So I've got 2 tag ends here. I'm going to pull enough through that I can create a loop in one side. Don't worry about the other side right now. I just keep that kind of tucked in my hand like that to keep it out of the way. This is an easy knot to tie even on the water. For this purpose, I'm only going to do a couple of wraps. But I like to start with the braid side first, and I typically do about 7 wraps with the braid on the mono. So this would be your mono line coming out, and this would be my braid side, making the loop. So I'm going to wrap that around, like I said, around both the mono and through the loop that I've created with the braid. Typically about 7 times. For this purpose, I'm just going to do a few wraps, but you guys get the idea. Then holding all the tag ends, all the loose ends, I'm going to grab this one and hold these 2. Try to keep that from bending, but I'm going to just basically cinch it down. You can wet the line a little bit with your mouth if you need to, but you'll end up with something like this. So if you'll notice, this tag end, which would be the mono, slides. You can slide right through the knot. That's what makes this knot so awesome. So you can pull yourself enough slack to be able to create the same situation on the other side. Basically, you got the 2 lines side by side. You create that loop, just like that. You see the 2 lines, I just line them up at the top. And then I'm going to do wraps. Now, if this is mono, depending on the thickness, 4 to 5 wraps is really all you need. And again, this would be the mono wrapping around itself and the braid. Do the same thing. Just kind of hold everything and pull it tight. So now that you have basically 2 uni knots with the 2 different materials, you can grab the mono or fluorocarbon and the braid with the other hand, and you just basically pull those together and they cinch down against each other. The harder you pull against them, the tighter they're going to cinch and pull against one another. And you can trim this up. This will cast through your guides well. So just cut the tag ends off. Be careful not to trim your main line. I have done that often. But you got a nice clean knot that'll pass right through your guides. And like I said, the harder you pull on it, the tighter that's going to get and the cleaner it's going to get. Now I'm going to show you a few knots that I use to connect the hook or lure. This is going to represent the hook or lure and the eye of the hook. So if I don't have a fluorocarbon or monofilament leader and I'm using straight braid, which I do sometimes with spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, things that I'm moving through the water pretty quick, I use the Palomar knot, however you say that. Basically, I double the line up, so this is your line. This is a great knot for braid. It'll work on mono too, but the nice thing about it with braid is it's really quick and easy. It's a small knot and it's really strong. So I double the line up like that. Make sure you have plenty. I run the loop through the eye of the hook. Pulling it through. So now I have my tag end right here, the hook in the middle, and the loop in my hand. Now you basically just do an overhand knot with the loop. And you take the bait. So depending on the size of the bait, you may need more line. But you take the bait and feed it through that loop. And I just let it go of it. Take the bait and feed it through that loop. Just kind of clear it down and you cinch it tight. You'll usually have a lot longer tag end with this knot than you do typically with anything else. So you trim that off. So you just trim that tag off and you're good to go. Nice strong knot. Works great with braid because braid is a smaller diameter knot, and a lot of times will slip with other knots like the Clinch or the improved Clinch. This knot does not slip at all. It pulls tight, plus you have 2 pieces of line that are actually going around the eye of the hook or the eye of the bait. The next knot I use a lot, especially when attaching jig heads or something like topwater that doesn't have a split ring on the actual bait. So if I'm attaching it straight to the jig head or straight to something like a spook, I like this knot because it's going to give you the most natural presentation. It's a very common knot that's also used in fly fishing a lot because you want the most natural presentation possible. So I'm going to lay my bait down, my carabiner, and I'm just going to tie or start an overhand knot. So again, I'm just starting an overhand knot. I've got plenty of tag. Always keep plenty of tag. Go through and make your overhand, just one. And cinch it, but don't cinch it all the way down. Leave it kind of loose and then just hold it with your fingers. Then feed that tag in through the eye of the hook or the bait. Then back through the overhand knot that you just made. At this point, I kind of slide it down typically and get it where I want it so that the loop is nice and tight right along the eye of the hook. And I might even cinch down my knot a little bit more so I know it's going to ride where it's supposed to be. I pinch the knot between my forefinger and my thumb. And at this point, you're basically tying an improved clinch. I make a couple of wraps. When I'm fly fishing, I make less. That's an Estrada tip. Typically, I do 4 to 5 depending on the thickness of fluorocarbon or main line that I'm using. At that point, you're going back through the knot again and back through the loop that you just created. You just kind of want to slowly cinch all that down. Again, don't be afraid to moisten this. Put a little spit on it. That's going to just help everything slide together well. Holding your tag in, I like to kind of put pressure on that. And then just really nice, pull it down. You can even take your fingers and help it a little bit to kind of cinch down and pull the tag, just making sure everything's nice and tight. Now I'm going to trim the tag end off. And now you have a really great knot that is going to allow lots of movement in your bait. This is called the non-slip loop knot. Last but not least, I'm going to show you probably one of the most common and widely used knots to attach a bait or hook to line. Again, I don't like using this knot for braid because it is so slick and thin, but this works great, especially if you have a split ring bait that's already going to allow that movement. You just take the line and feed it through the eye of the hook, or the split ring in this case, or carabiner actually in this case. Again, I always like to have plenty of line. I don't want to start trying to tie it and not be able to tie it down. And then I take the line, and I'm going to do, depending on the thickness of the line, 4 to 5 wraps when I'm using monofilament or fluorocarbon is going to be fine. You can also just take the hook, if you don't want to do your finger, and just spin the hook 4 to 5 times. It's going to do the same thing if you're holding the main line and the tag in. Then you kind of pinch it at the top and run your tag in back through that loop at the bottom. If I pulled it tight from this step, it would just be a regular clinch knot, which works fine when I'm using heavier line, but I find sometimes with lighter line that it might slip through. So after putting it through that loop that I created, I actually go back through the top loop, just like I did on the non-slip loop knot. So once it's through there, I can cinch all this down. Kind of hold the tag in, just to hold it in place and pull the main line. I'm going to go ahead and moisten it a little bit. I know you guys like this part. After you moisten it a little bit, then you can just keep pulling, holding the tag line so that it gets nice and tight on the hook. Once you see that knot kind of cinched down, you can pull it loose and take your fingers and just kind of help the knot get really nice and tight. And there you have it, the improved clinch knot. You just need to trim the tag in and you're all done. Those are my 4 favorite knots, and really the only knots that I ever use while fishing for probably 85–90% of the species I go after. There are a lot of good knots, especially if you're going after bigger game fish, but for bass, redfish, trout, speckled trout, just about any kind of inshore or freshwater species, these knots will be the only ones you'll ever need to know. Hopefully these knots will help you catch more fish.